Question 226. A company is looking for an Azure solution that will enable them to create private connections between Microsoft data centers and their colocation facility. This connection should provide low latency traffic and support 100 gigabytes of bandwidth. Which of the following is best suited for the requirement? Option A, Express Route. Option B, a virtual private network. Option C, Azure Application Gateway. Option D, Azure Local Gateway. And the correct answer is option A, Express Route. Explanation. Express Route is an Azure service that lets you create private connections between Microsoft data centers and infrastructure that's on your premises or in a colocation facility. Express Route provides private connections to Azure, increased reliability and speed lower latency. Supports bandwidth up to 100 Gbps. Connects directly to your WAN. Connect your on-premises networks using the Microsoft Global Network. Support for IPv6 workloads. Physical link encryption with MACsec. Option B is incorrect. Comparatively, the express route is the low latency connection. Option C is incorrect. Azure Application Gateway is a web traffic load balancer that enables you to manage traffic to your web applications. Traditional load balancer operate at the transport layer OSI layer for TCP and UDP and route traffic based on the source IP address and port to a destination IP address and port. Option D is incorrect. Azure Local Gateway is a local network gateway that represents the hardware or software VPN device in your local network in-house. This is generally created in Azure to set up a site-to-site VPN connection between an Azure virtual network and your local network. Next question. You have recommended staying with the basic support plan to meet the below requirements. Provide an option to contact Microsoft support engineers by phone or email. Is your recommendation in line with the requirement? Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. The basic support plan has no access to support engineers. Next question. You want to restrict access to terminating the virtual machine to a specific group of users. What concept of the virtual machine would you use to accomplish this? Option A, policies. Option B, access control IAM. Option C, reliability. Option D, security. And the correct answer is option B, access control IAM. Explanation. If you go to the access control section, you can define a role assignment for a user that could conduct specific operations on the virtual machine. Next question. A company wants to migrate some scripts to Azure. They want to take advantage of the serverless capabilities in Azure. They choose to use the Azure Content Delivery Network. Would this service meet the requirement? Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. CDN is used for delivering web content to end users. Below is what the Microsoft documentation states about this service. Azure Content Delivery Network CDN is a global CDN solution for delivering high bandwidth content. With Azure CDN, you can cache static objects loaded from Azure Blob Storage, a web application, or any publicly accessible web server by using the closest point of presence POP server. The right option for this requirement is Azure Function. Next question. Which of the following options would help to secure communications between millions of IoT devices? Option A, IoT Edge. Option B, IoT Solution Accelerators. Option C, IoT Hub. Option D, Azure Synapses. And the correct answer is option C, IoT Hub. Explanation. Azure IoT Hub provides a cloud-hosted solution back-end to connect virtually any device. Extend your solution from the cloud to the edge with per-device authentication, built-in device management, and scaled provisioning. Next question. You want to protect Azure resources against DDoS attacks and also get real-time attack metrics. What is the best solution to meet this need? Option A, Azure Firewall. Option B, Network Security Group NSG. Option C, DDoS Protection Standard. Option D, Azure Directory. And the correct answer is option C, DDoS Protection Standard. Explanation: Azure DDoS Protection Standard, combined with application design best practices, provides enhanced DDoS mitigation features to defend against DDoS attacks. It is automatically tuned to help protect your specific Azure resources in a virtual network. Protection is simple to enable on any new or existing virtual network, and it requires no application or resource changes. It has several advantages over the basic service, including logging, alerting, and telemetry. Next question. You are looking for a tool that provides guidance and recommendations to improve an Azure environment. Which of the following would be best suited for this requirement? Option A, Azure Advisor. Option B, Azure Cognitive Services. Option C, Azure Application Insights. Option D, Azure Resource Manager. And the correct answer is option A, Azure Advisor. Explanation: Azure Advisor is a personalized cloud consultant that helps you follow best practices to optimize your Azure deployments. It analyzes your resource configurations and uses telemetry and then recommends solutions that can help you improve the cost effectiveness, performance, reliability, formerly called high availability, and security of your Azure resources. Next question. A company plans to deploy Azure resources to a resource group. The resources, however, will be located in different locations. Is it possible to have resources in the same resource group but in different regions? Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation: You cannot have resources that belong to the same resource group but be in multiple regions. Next question. A company is planning to deploy Azure resources to a resource group, also planning to assign permissions to the resource groups. Would resources within the resource groups inherit the same permissions? Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option A, yes. Explanation: Yes, resources in the resource group inherit the same permissions as the resource group. Permissions in the top level scope are automatically inherited to the level below, meaning subscription level users have the same permissions to the resource groups, and the resource group level users have the same permission to the individual resources within the resource group. Next question. A company has deployed an application to Azure. Users connect to Azure AD via the internet. There is a requirement that when a user attempts to log in from an IP address that hasn't been seen before, they must change their password. Which of the following options should the company consider? Option A, Azure AD Connect Health. Option B, Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. Option C, Azure Active Directory. Option D, Microsoft Defender for Identity. And the correct answer is option D, Microsoft Defender for Identity. Explanation: Microsoft Defender for Identity is a cloud-based security solution that leverages your on-premises Active Directory signals to identity, detect, and investigate advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious insider actions directed at your organization. Option A is incorrect. Azure AD Connect Health is used to check the health status of Azure AD Connect. Option B is incorrect. Azure AD Privileged Identity Management is used for privileged level access in Azure. Option C is incorrect. Azure Active Directory is used to create users in Azure. Next question. You want to ensure that resources within the Azure resource group don't get accidentally deleted. Which Azure solution will help you to achieve that? Option A, Azure Logs. Option B, Azure Policies. Option C, Access Control. Option D, Diagnostics Settings. And the correct answer is option A, Azure Logs. Explanation: As an administrator, you can lock a subscription, resource group, or resource to prevent other users in your organization from accidentally deleting or modifying critical resources. The lock overrides any permissions the user might have. Option B is incorrect. Azure policies are used for governance purposes. Option C is incorrect. Access control is used to set the permission for resources. Option D is incorrect. Azure Diagnostics is used to enable diagnostics on the underlying resources. Next question. You have a set of virtual machines configured in Azure. One of them has been down for an extended period. Therefore, it violated the standard SLA set by Microsoft. How will Microsoft reimburse the downtime cost? Option A. By directly sending money to the customer's bank account. Option B. By spinning up another virtual machine free of cost for the client. Option C. By providing a service free of cost to use for a specific duration of time. Option D. By providing service credits to the customer. And the correct answer is option D. By providing service credits to the customer. Explanation. Microsoft offers service level credits if it does not meet the SLA targets, since this is clearly given in the documentation. All other options are incorrect. Next question. You are planning to have an Azure storage layer that can be used to store data that is infrequently used, but the data need to access quickly in the event of a failure. Which of the following storage tier for Azure Blob Storage would be suitable for this type of requirement? Option A. Premium storage. Option B. Hot storage. Option C. Cool storage. Option D. Archive storage. And the correct answer is option C. Cool storage. Explanation. The Azure Cool Blob Storage tier is a good choice for data backups that are older, but that you might still need to access quickly in the event of a failure. Next question. An existing Azure application needs to be integrated with an enterprise messaging solution. Please select the correct option for the above given requirement. Option A. Logic App. Option B. API Management. Option C. Data Factory. Option D. Service Bus. And the correct answer is option D. Service Bus. Explanation. Azure Service Bus is a fully managed enterprise message broker with message queues and publish subscribe topics in a namespace. Service Bus is used to decouple applications and services from each other. Option A is incorrect. Logic App is used as a workflow service. Option B is incorrect. API management is used for managing API. Option C is incorrect. Data Factory is used as an ETL service on the cloud. Next question. A company has launched a set of virtual machines in their pay-as-you-go Azure subscription. After launching a set of VMS, they seem to have reached a limit. Further provisioning is not possible as well. What can be done to allow the company to provision more virtual machines? Option A. Increase the limit in Azure Advisor. Option B. Increase the limit in the Azure Monitor. Option C. Increase the limit using the Azure CLI. Option D. Raise a support ticket with Microsoft. And the correct answer is option D. Raise a support ticket with Microsoft. Explanation. As per Azure documentation, if you want to raise the limit or quota above the default limit, open an online customer support request at no charge. Question 242. You are planning to create several SQL databases in Azure. Which of the following is the correct category for the Azure SQL database service? Option A. Infrastructure as a Service IaaS. Option B. Platform as a Service PaaS. Option C. Software as a Service SaaS. Option D. Function as a Service FaaS. And the correct answer is option B. Platform as a Service. Explanation. Azure SQL Database is a relational database as a service hosted in Azure that falls into the industry category of Platform as a Service PaaS. Next question. Select yes or no. For the following statement, Azure Storage account always replicates the data to the secondary region. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option A, yes. Explanation. As per Azure documentation, data in an Azure Storage account is always replicated 3 times in the primary region. Azure Storage offers 2 options for how your data is replicated in the primary region. Locally redundant storage LRS copies your data synchronously 3 times within a single physical location in the primary region. LRS is the least expensive replication option, but is not recommended for applications requiring high availability or durability. Zero redundant storage ZRS copies your data synchronously across 3 Azure availability zones in the primary region. For applications requiring high availability, Microsoft recommends using ZRS in the primary region and also replicating to a secondary region. Next question. A company wants to make use of Azure for the deployment of various solutions. They want to prevent suspicious attacks and threats against Azure resources. What Azure service helps to prevent such attacks by using built-in sensors? Option A. Azure AD Identity Protection. Option B. Microsoft Defender for Identity. Option C. Azure Privileged Identity Management. Option D. Azure DDoS attacks. And the correct answer is option B. Microsoft Defender for Identity. Explanation. Microsoft Defender for Identity is a cloud-based security solution that leverages your on-premise Active Directory signals to identify, detect, and investigate advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious insider action directed at your organization. Monitor and analyze user behavior and activities. Defender for Identity's proprietary sensors monitor organizational domain controllers, providing a comprehensive view of all user activities from every device. Defender for Identity monitors and analyzes user activities and information across your network, such as permissions and group membership, creating a behavioral baseline for each user. Options A and C are incorrect. They are used for protecting identities in Azure AD. Option D is incorrect. Azure DDoS is a solution to protect against DDoS attacks. Next question. A company is planning to host resources in Azure. They want to ensure that Azure complies with the rules and regulations of the region for hosting resources. Which of the following can assist the company in obtaining compliance reports? Option A. Azure AD. Option B. Microsoft Trust Center. Option C. Azure Advisor. Option D. Azure Security Center. And the correct answer is option B. Microsoft Trust Center. Explanation. The Trust Center is an important part of the Microsoft Trusted Cloud initiative and provides support and resources for the legal and compliance community. The Trust Center provides in-depth information about security, privacy, compliance offerings, policies, features, and practices across Microsoft Cloud products. Option A is incorrect. Azure AD is used for identity management. Option C is incorrect. Azure Advisor is used to provide recommendations in Azure. Option D is incorrect. Azure Security Center is a unified infrastructure security management system in Azure. Next question. You are planning to deploy a web server and database server in your Azure account. You have to ensure that traffic restrictions are in place so that the database server can only communicate with the web server. Which of the following would help you to implement these restrictions? Option A. Azure Service Bus. Option B. Local Network Gateway. Option C. Virtual Private Gateway. Option D. Network Security Group, NSGs. And the correct answer is option D. Network Security Groups, NSGs. Explanation. A network security group in Azure is the way to activate a rule or access control list ACL, which will allow or deny network traffic to your virtual machine instances in a virtual network. NSGs can be associated with subnets or individual virtual machine instances within that subnet. Option A is incorrect. Azure Service Bus is used as a messaging system. Option B is incorrect. Local Network Gateway is used to represent a VPN device in a site-to-site VPN connection. Option C is incorrect. Virtual Private Gateway is normally used to connect networks via the internet. Next question. A company is planning to set up a solution in Azure. The solution would have the following key requirement. Provide a cloud service that makes it easy, fast, and cost-effective to analyze streaming data using open source frameworks like Apache Hadoop. Which of the following Azure services would meet the criteria? Option A. Azure Content Delivery Network. Option B. Azure HD Insight. Option C. Azure Load Balancer. Option D. Azure Synapse. And the correct answer is option B. Azure HD Insight. Explanation. Azure HD Insight is a managed full-spectrum open-source analytics service in the cloud for enterprises. With HD Insight, you can use open-source frameworks such as Hadoop, Apache Spark, Apache Hive, LLAP, Apache Kafka, Apache Storm, R, and more in your Azure environment. Answer A is incorrect. Azure Content Delivery Network CDN is a global CDN solution for delivering high bandwidth content. Answer C is incorrect. Azure Load Balancer refers to evenly distributing load incoming network traffic across a group of backend resources or servers. Answer D is incorrect. Azure Synapse is an analytics service that brings together enterprise data, warehousing, and big data analytics. Next question. A company needs to deploy several identical virtual machines. All of these virtual machines will have the same set of permissions as well. Where would you deploy Azure virtual machines to minimize administrative overhead? Option A, Azure Resource Groups. Option B, Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets. Option C, Azure Policies. Option D, Azure Tags. And the correct answer is option A, Azure Resource Groups. Explanation. When you deploy a resource to a resource group with a set of permissions defined, the resource will inherit the permissions assigned to the resource group. An example is shown below. Next question. A company wants to host an application in Azure. The application connects to a database in Azure. The company would like to store the database password in a secure location. You recommend using the Azure Key Vault to store passwords. Would this meet the requirement? Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option A, yes. Explanation. Yes, this is the right tool to use. As per Azure documentation, Azure Key Vault is a cloud service for securely storing and accessing secrets. A secret is anything that you want to tightly control access to, such as API keys, passwords, certificates, or cryptographic keys. Key Vault service supports two types of containers, vaults and Managed Hardware Security Module HSM pools. Next question. A company has a set of virtual machines defined in Azure. They want to find out which user shut down a particular virtual machine in the last 7 days. Which of the following can help with this requirement? Option A, Azure Activity Logs. Option B, Azure Event Hubs. Option C, Azure Advisor. Option D, Azure Service Health. And the correct answer is option A, Azure Activity Logs. Explanation. The Activity Log is a platform log in Azure that provides insight into subscription-level events. This includes such information as to when a resource is modified or when a virtual machine is started. You can view the activity log in the Azure portal or retrieve entries with PowerShell and CLI. Next question. Which Azure resource will help you to meet the below requirement? Ensure that the virtual machine administrator team can only deploy virtual machines and their dependent resources. Option A, Azure Role-Based Access Control. Option B, Azure Identity Protection. Option C, Azure Policies. Option D, Azure Logs. And the correct answer is option A, Azure Role-Based Access Control. Explanation. You can achieve this with role-based access control. You can deploy the administrator to one group and just provide the role for virtual machine access. Azure Role-Based Access Control, Azure RBAC, is a system that provides fine-grained access management of Azure resources. Using Azure RBAC, you can segregate duties within your team and grant only the amount of access to users that they need to perform their jobs. Option B is incorrect. Azure Identity Protection is used to protect Azure AD identities. Option C is incorrect. Azure Policies is used to govern the resources in Azure. Option D is incorrect. Azure Logs is used to protect Azure resources from users accidentally updating or deleting Azure resources. Next question. Which of the following tools can you use on the Ubuntu machines? Option A, the Azure CLI and Azure Portal only. Option B, the Azure CLI and PowerShell only. Option C, the Azure Portal and PowerShell only. Option D, the Azure CLI, Azure PowerShell and Azure Portal. And the correct answer is option D, the Azure CLI, Azure PowerShell and Azure Portal. Explanation. The Azure CLI and PowerShell are available on all platforms. The Azure portal can be viewed on any browser and can be viewed on almost all operating systems. Next question. A company needs to connect its on-premises data center to an Azure virtual network using a side-to-side connection. Which of the following should you create as part of this implementation? Option A, Virtual Network. Option B, Virtual Network Gateway. Option C, Application Gateway. Option D, DNS. And the correct answer is option B, Virtual Network Gateway. Explanation. Azure Virtual Network Gateway serves as the cross-premises gateway, connecting your workloads in Azure Virtual Network to your on-premises sites. It is required to connect to on-premises sites through IPsec S2S VPN channels or through express route circuits. Next question. Select yes or no for the following statement. Azure resources can only access resources within the same resource group. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. Azure resources can access resources that are in other resource groups as well. Next question. A company has an application hosted on a set of virtual machines. When it comes to virtual machine maintenance, which of the following is the responsibility of the customer? Option A, maintaining the underlying physical servers. Option B, security of data hosted on Azure virtual machines. Option C, uptime of the virtual machine service. Option D, updating hypervisor. And the correct answer is option B, security of data hosted on Azure virtual machines. Explanation. The security of the data hosted on the Azure virtual machines. All of the other aspects are the responsibility of Azure. Next question. A company wants to configure a set of Azure virtual machines. An application will be installed on these virtual machines. The company wants to ensure that user traffic is distributed across the virtual machines. You decide to use the Azure HD Insight service for traffic distribution. Would this fulfill the requirement? Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. No. Azure HD Insight is a managed full-spectrum open-source analytics service in the cloud for enterprises. You have to leverage Azure Load Balancer in this case. Question 257. True or false? If your feature is in the general availability phase, then your feature will receive support from all Microsoft support channels. Option A, false. Option B, true. And the correct answer is option B, true. Explanation. This is true. Do not use preview features in production apps. Next question. Which Azure management tool analyzes your uses of Azure and makes suggestions specifically targeted to help you optimize your uses of Azure regarding cost, security, and performance? Option A, Azure Mobile App. Option B, Azure Advisor. Option C, Azure Firewall. Option D, Azure Service Health. And the correct answer is option B, Azure Advisor. Explanation. Azure Advisor analyzes your specific uses of Azure and makes helpful suggestions on how it can be improved. Next question. If you have an Azure free account with a $200 credit for the first month, what happens when you reach the $200 limit? Option A, your account is automatically closed. Option B, your credit card is automatically billed. Option C, all services are stopped and you must decide whether you want to convert to a paid account or not. Option D, you cannot create any more resources until you add more credits to the account. And the correct answer is option C, all services are stopped and you must decide whether you want to convert to a paid account or not. Explanation. Using up the free credits causes all your resources to be stopped until you decide to get a paid account. Next question. Which Azure service, when enabled, will automatically block traffic to or from known malicious IP addresses and domains? Option A, Network Security Groups. Option B, Azure Firewall. Option C, Azure Active Directory. Option D, Load Balancer. And the correct answer is option B, Azure Firewall. Explanation. Azure Firewall has a threat intelligence option that will automatically block traffic to or from bad actors on the internet. Next question. If you wanted to get an alert every time a new virtual machine is created, where could you create that? Option A, Azure Policy. Option B, Azure Dashboard. Option C, Azure Monitor. Option D, Subscription Settings. And the correct answer is option C, Azure Monitor. Explanation. The best place to track events at the resource level is Azure Monitor. Next question. Which of the following are one of the advantages of running your cloud in a private cloud? Option A. You own the hardware so you can change private cloud hosting providers easily. Option B. Private cloud is significantly cheaper than the public cloud. Option C. Assurance that your code, data and applications are running on isolated hardware and on an isolated network. And the correct answer is option C. Assurance that your code, data and applications are running on isolated hardware and on an isolated network. Explanation. Private cloud generally means that you are running your code on isolated computing, not mixed in with other companies. Next question. What is the significance of the Azure reason? Why is it important? Option A. Reason is just a folder structure in which you organize resources, much like file folders on a computer. Option B. You must select a reason when creating most resources, and the reason is the area of the world where those resources will be physically located. Option C. Once you select a reason, you cannot create resources outside of that reason. So, selecting the right reason is an important decision. Next question. What is the name of the collective set of APIs that provide machine learning and artificial intelligence services to your own applications, like voice recognition, image tagging, and chatbot? Option A. Natural Language Service, LUIS. Option B. Cognitive Services. Option C. Azure Machine Learning Studio. Option D. Azure Batch. And the correct answer is option B. Cognitive Services. Explanation. Azure Cognitive Services is the set of machine learning and AI APIs. Next question. Which of the following elements is considered part of the network layer of network security? Option A. Locks on the data center doors. Option B. All of the above. Option C. Keeping operating systems up to date with patches. Option D. Separate servers into distinct subnets by role. And the correct answer is option D. Separate servers into distinct subnets by role. Next question. What are groups of subscriptions called? Option A. Management groups. Option B. ARM groups. Option C. Azure Policy. Option D. Subscription groups. And the correct answer is option A. Management groups. Explanation. Subscriptions can be nested and placed into management groups to make managing them easier. Next question. Which Azure service can be enabled to enable multi-factor authentication for administrators but not require it for regular users? Option A. Privileged Identity Management. Option B. Azure Firewall. Option C. Azure AD B2B. Option D. Advanced Threat Protection. And the correct answer is option A. Privileged Identity Management. Explanation. Privileged Identity Management can be used to ensure privileged users have to jump through additional verification because of their role. Next question. Which Azure resource satisfies the below requirement? Provide an environment for desktop and application virtualization. Option A. Azure App Service. Option B. Windows Virtual Desktop. Option C. Azure Virtual Machines. Option D. Azure Virtual Network. And the correct answer is option B. Windows Virtual Desktop. Explanation. You can use Windows Virtual Desktop for the purpose of desktop and application virtualization. Azure Virtual Desktop, formerly known as Windows Virtual Desktop, is a Microsoft Azure-based system for virtualizing its Windows operating systems, providing virtualized desktops and applications in the cloud. It is aimed at enterprise customers rather than at individual users. Next question. You are planning to use the Azure Storage Blob service to store some of the important data files. Is it possible to set the objects to use the archive access tier at the object level? Option A. Yes. Option B. No. And the correct answer is option A, yes. Explanation. Yes, you can set the object to use the archive access tier at the object level. If you have an object, click on the Change tier. There you can change the access tier to use the archive access tier. Next question. Which Azure service can meet the below requirement? Ensure that only virtual machines of a particular size can be launched within an Azure subscription. Option A, Azure Resource Logs. Option B, Azure Blueprints. Option C, Azure Resource Tags. Option D, Azure Policies. And the correct answer is option D, Azure Policies. Explanation. This can be accomplished with the use of Azure Policies. With Azure Policies, you can use an inbuilt policy to specify the SKU size that can be used to launch an Azure virtual machine. Azure Policy is a service in Azure that allows you to create policies that enforce and control the properties of a resource. When these policies are used, they enforce different rules and effects on your resources. So, those resources stay compliant with your IT governance standards. Next question. A company is planning to use an entire suite of Microsoft products. Which of the following belongs to the category of Software as a Service, SaaS? Option A, Microsoft Office 365. Option B, Azure Virtual Machine Service. Option C, Azure App Service. Option D, Azure Content Delivery Network Service. And the correct answer is option A, Microsoft Office 365. Explanation. As per Azure documentation, Software as a Service allows users to connect to and use cloud-based apps over the internet. Common examples are email, calendaring, and office tools, such as Microsoft Office 365. SaaS provides a complete software solution that you purchase on a pay-as-you-go basis from a cloud service provider. Option B is incorrect. Azure Virtual Machine Service belongs to the category of Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS. Option C and D are incorrect, since they belong to the category of Platform as a Service, PaaS. Question 1. Suppose the lead architect in your company has asked your team to implement a PaaS-based solution in Azure for a quick proof of concept POC to senior management. One of your colleagues goes ahead and creates an Azure Logic app and an Azure Data Factory deployment. Would you agree with this implementation? Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option B, yes. Explanation. Azure Logic app and Azure Data Factory both fall under the PaaS Platform as a Service category. Next question. One of the primary benefits of using an Azure Key Vault is dash. Option A, automatically masking sensitive information. Option B, enforcing organizational standards and to assess compliance at scale. Option C, key management. Option D, to see and stop threats before they cause harm. And the correct answer is option C, key management. Explanation. Enforcing organizational standards and to assess compliance at scale, this is done by Azure Policy. To see and stop threats before they cause harm, this is done by Azure Sentinel. From the official documentation, key management. Azure Key Vault can be used as a key management solution. Azure Key Vault makes it easy to create and control the encrypt keys used to encrypt your data. Next question. We get total control of the underlying operating system when working with Platform as a Service PaaS solutions. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option A, no. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation. Platform as a Service is a complete deployment and deployment environment in the cloud, with resources that enable you to deliver everything from simple cloud-based apps to sophisticated, cloud-enabled enterprise applications. You purchase the resources you need from a cloud service provider on a pay-as-you-go basis and access them over a secure internet connection. Like IaaS, PaaS includes infrastructure, servers, storage, and networking, but also middleware, deployment tools, business intelligence services, database management system, and more.
PaaS is designed to support the complete web application lifecycle: building, testing, deploying, managing, and updating. PaaS allows you to avoid the expense and complexity of buying and managing software licenses, the underlying application infrastructure, and middleware, container orchestrators such as Kubernetes, or the deployment tools and other resources. You manage the applications and services you develop, and the cloud service provider typically manages everything else.
Next question. Which of the following Azure support plans grants access to? Number 1. 24/7 access to support engineers via email and phone. Number 2. Training in the form of webinars from Azure experts. Number 3. Access to the support API. Option A. Standard. Option B. Professional Direct. Option C. Developer. Option D. Basic. And the correct answer is option B. Professional Direct. Explanation. Look at the table below. Clearly, Professional Direct is the correct option. It is the only option, last column, that fulfills all mentioned requirements. Next question. Which of the following affect cost in Azure? Choose two options. Option A. Location. Option B. Instance size. Option C. Knowledge center uses. Option D. Availability zone. And the correct answer is option A. Location. And option B. Instance size. Explanation. According to the official docs, the instance size and the location, that is US or Europe etc., affect the prices. The knowledge center is completely free to use, and you aren't charged for an availability zone. Next question. When should you scale out your deployment? Option A. When you need additional virtual machines or computers to speed up your application. Option B. When you need to reduce your cost of operation. Option C. When you want to reduce the unused capacity of your system. Option D. When you need a stronger CPU to make your application run faster. And the correct answer is option A. When you need additional virtual machines or computers to speed up your application. Explanation. Scale out. A scale-out operation is the equivalent of creating multiple copies of your website and adding a load balancer to distribute the demand between them. When you scale out a website in Azure, there is no need to configure load balancing separately, since this is already provided by the platform. Next question. Which of the following services provides information about Azure service incidents, plan maintenance, and can notify you of issues via email, SMS, and push notifications? Option A. Azure Trust Portal. Option B. Azure Monitor. Option C. Azure Service Health. Option D. Azure Initiatives. And the correct answer is option C. Azure Service Health. Explanation. According to the official Azure docs, Azure Service Health notifies you about Azure service incidents and plan maintenance so you can take action to mitigate downtime. We can configure customizable cloud alerts and use your personalized dashboard to analyze health issues, monitor the impact to your cloud resources, get guidance and support, and share details and updates. Next question. Which of the following services provides a personalized view of the health of the Azure services, reasons, and resources you rely on? Option A. Azure Resource Health. Option B. Azure Monitor. Option C. Azure Advisor. Option D. Azure Service Health. And the correct answer is option D. Azure Service Health. Explanation. Azure Service Health provides a personalized view of the health of the Azure services, reasons, and resources you rely on. The status.azure.com website, which displays only major issues that broadly affect Azure customers, does not provide the full picture, but Azure Service Health displays both major and smaller, localized issues that affect you. Service issues are rare, but it's important to be prepared for the unexpected. You can set up alerts that help you triage outages and plant maintenance. After an outage, Service Health provides official incident reports called Root Cause Analysis (RCAs), which you can share with stakeholders. Next question. Your company has explored some of the services in Azure Public Preview. One of the architects working in your team has advised you to deploy mission-critical services or applications to these services. Do you agree? Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. According to the official documentation, it is important to note that the services offered in public preview are excluded from the service level agreements (SLAs). It is therefore not a good idea to deploy production environments on resources or services that are in preview, public or private. Next question. A resource group can contain resources from multiple Azure regions. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option A, yes. Explanation. From the official documentation, resources from multiple different regions can be placed in a resource group. The resource group only contains metadata about the resources it contains. Next question. Deleting a resource group deletes all the resources inside it as well. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option A, yes. Explanation. From the Azure official docs, deleting the resource group will remove the resource group as well as all the resources in that resource group. This can be useful for the management of resources. For example, a virtual machine has several components: the VM itself, virtual disk, network adapter, etc. By placing the VM in its own resource group, you can delete the VM along with all its associated components by deleting the resource group. Another example is when creating a test environment. You could place the entire test environment, network components, virtual machines, etc. in one resource group. You can then delete the entire test environment by deleting the resource group. Next question. You have been asked by senior management to prepare a presentation describing not only the benefits but also the estimated cost savings you can realize by migrating your workloads to Azure. As the lead architect, which service would you use for these calculations? Option A, Azure TCO Calculator. Option B, Azure Monitor. Option C, Azure Cost Management. Option D, Azure Advisor. And the correct answer is option A, Azure TCO Calculator. Explanation. For users wishing to adopt cloud services, Azure provides a web-based TCO calculator. You can use this calculator to estimate the cost of migrating your data and applications to Azure and predict potential savings. Next question. What is the present maximum capacity for storage accounts? Option A, 2 PB. Option B, 750 TB. Option C, 500 TB. Option D, 5 PB. And the correct answer is option D, 5 PB. Explanation. Referring to the official Azure docs again, the maximum storage account capacity currently is 5 PB. These might change with time, so if you feel it has changed, inform me through message or in the question answer section. It will highly appreciate it. Next question. When you create a resource group, you need to provide a location for that resource group. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option B, yes. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, when you create a resource group, you need to provide a location for that resource group. You may be wondering, why does the resource group need a location? And if the resources can have different locations than the resource group, why does the resource group location matter at all? The resource group stores metadata about the resources. When you specify a location for the resource group,
you are specifying where that metadata is stored. For compliance reasons, you may need to ensure that your data is stored in a particular region. Next question. You have dozens of virtual machines VM hosted in Azure. The lead architect has asked for your suggestions to migrate all the VMS to an Azure pay-as-you-go subscription. Which expenditure model would apply to the stated requirement? Option A, operational. Option B, fault tolerant. Option C, scalable. Option D, capital. And the correct answer is option A, operational. Explanation. Fault tolerant and scalable are wrong answers because such payment models does not exist. Capital expenditure is also incorrect since we are not going to be paying anything upfront. Operational makes most sense since it means pay as you go, that is, paying only for what you consume and nothing else. Pay as you go. This offer is built at the standard pay as you go rates, except as otherwise specified. You will be notified through email at least 30 days in advance of any changes to the pay as you go rates. New services may be added periodically to the Azure platform. Azure will notify you in advance of these new services and any fees that might be charged for using them. However, you would only be charged if you elect to use the new services. Any taxes which may result from receiving services at no charge are the sole responsibility of the recipient. Question 16. Which of the following statement is true? You have a mission-critical deployment on the Azure cloud consisting of an Azure SQL database that has a service level agreement of 99.99% and a web app that has an SLA of 99.95%. The composite SLA for the application is the product of both SLAs, which equals 99.94%. Option A. The composite SLA for the application is the highest SLA associated to the application, which is 99.99%. Option B. The given statement is correct, without any changes needed. Option C. The composite SLA for the application is the difference between the two SLAs, which is 0.05%. Option D. The composite SLA for the application is the lowest SLA associated to the application, which is 99.95%. And the correct answer is option B. The given statement is correct without any changes needed. Explanation. Composite SLAs involve multiple services supporting an application, each with differing levels of availability. For example, consider an app service web app that writes to Azure SQL database. At the time of writing this answer, these Azure services have the following SLAs. App service web apps is 99.95%. SQL database is 99.99%. What is the maximum downtime you would expect for this application? If either service fails, the whole application fails. The probability of each service failing is independent. So, the composite SLA for this application is 99.94%. That's lower than the individual SLAs, which isn't surprising because an application that relies on multiple services has more potential failure points. Next question. Select the characteristics of the public cloud from the following. Option A. Hardware must be purchased for startup and maintenance. Option B. Unsecured connections. Option C. Metered pricing. Option D. No capital expenditure to scale up. Option E. Organizations are responsible for hardware maintenance and updates. Option F. Applications can be quickly provisioned and deprovisioned. And the correct answer is option C. Metered pricing. And option D. No capital expenditure to scale up. And option F. Applications can be quickly provisioned and deprovisioned. Explanation. From the Azure docs. Cloud model comparison. Public cloud. No capital expenditures to scale up. Applications can be quickly provisioned and deprovisioned. Organizations pay only for what they use. Private cloud. Hardware must be purchased for startup and maintenance. Organizations have complete control over resources and security. Organizations are responsible for hardware maintenance and updates. Hybrid cloud provides the most flexibility. Organizations determine where to run their applications. Organizations control security, compliance, or legal requirements. With the public cloud, you get pay-as-you-go pricing and you pay only for what you use. No capex costs are involved. With the public cloud, you have self-service management. You are responsible for the deployment and configuration of the cloud resources, such as virtual machines or websites. The underlying hardware that hosts the cloud resources is managed by the cloud provider. Incorrect answers. Hardware must be purchased for startup and maintenance. You don't have to purchase any hardware on the public cloud. The underlying hardware is shared, so you could have multiple customers using cloud resources hosted on the same physical hardware. Moreover, this is a characteristic of the private cloud. Unsecured connections. Connections to the public cloud are secure. Organizations are responsible for hardware maintenance and updates. This is a characteristic of the private cloud. Next question. You are a tech startup owner and would like to migrate your self-hosted apps and services to Azure. Which of the following is an advantage of the public cloud that you will realize thanks to the migration? Option A. Peace of mind that Azure will send over hardware for you to store in your warehouse. Option B. Resources are not shared with others, so higher levels of control and privacy are possible. Option C. Your organization can customize its cloud environment to meet specific business needs. Option D. Near unlimited scalability, as on-demand resources are available to meet your business needs. And the correct answer is option D. Near unlimited scalability, as on-demand resources are available to meet your business needs. Explanation. The public cloud is a shared entity whereby multiple corporations each use a portion of the resources in the cloud. The hardware resources, servers, infrastructure, etc. are managed by the cloud provider. Multiple companies create resources such as virtual machines and virtual networks on the hardware resources. Incorrect answers. Resources are not shared with others, so higher levels of control and privacy are possible. This is a characteristic of a private cloud. Your organization can customize its cloud environment to meet specific business needs. This is also a characteristic of a private cloud. Peace of mind that Azure will send over hardware for you to store in your warehouse. Azure stores all infrastructure on their end. You would be storing hardware that you purchased and incur capex in a private cloud setup. Next question. Filling the blanks. The dash is a regulation in European Union law on data protection and privacy in the European Union and the European Economic Area. Option A. General Data Protection Regulation GDPR. Option B. International Organization for Standardization ISO. Option C. Center for Internet Security CIS. Option D. American National Standards Institute ANSI. And the correct answer is option A. General Data Protection Regulation GDPR. Explanation. The General Data Protection Regulation GDPR is a regulation in European Union law on data protection and privacy in the European Union and the European Economic Area. The GDPR is an important component of EU privacy law and of human rights law, in particular Article 8 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. Next question. It is possible to deploy Azure resources through a tablet by using Bash and the Azure Cloud Shell. Option A. No. Option B. Yes. And the correct answer is option B. Yes. Explanation. From the official docs, Azure Cloud Shell is an interactive, authenticated, browser-accessible the key to everything since all you need is a browser, and the OS doesn't matter. Shell for managing Azure resources. It provides the flexibility of choosing the shell experience that best suits the way you work, either Bash or PowerShell. All you need is a browser on your tablet and then. Next question. All resource types support tags in Azure. Option A. Yes. Option B. No. And the correct answer is option B. No. Explanation. No. According to the official documentation,
Tax cannot be applied to all resources types. See below. Next question. During live telecasts of football matches, streaming platforms sometimes experience massive spikes in viewership and users visiting their websites when a goal is scored. Which of the following would be beneficial to deal with such expected demand for resources? Option A. Serverless computing. Option B. Kubernetes. Option C. Containers. Option D. Virtual machines. And the correct answer is Option A. Serverless computing. Explanation. Serverless computing enables developers to build applications faster by eliminating the need for them to manage infrastructure. With serverless applications, the cloud service provider automatically provisions, scales, and manages the infrastructure required to run the code. While understanding the definition of serverless computing, it's important to note that servers are still running the code. The serverless name comes from the fact that the tasks associated with infrastructure provisioning and management are invisible to the developer. This approach enables developers to increase their focus on the business logic and deliver more value to the core of the business important. Serverless computing helps teams increase their productivity and bring products to market faster, and it allows organizations to better optimize resources and stay focused on innovation. Next question. Power BI can access infrequently used data from which of the following? Option A. Azure PostgreSQL. Option B. Azure SQL Data Warehouse. Option C. Azure Cosmos DB. Option D. Azure Data Lake. And the correct answer is Option B. Azure SQL Data Warehouse. And Option D. Azure Data Lake. Explanation. Azure Data Lake and Azure SQL Data Warehouse are the correct options. Next question. Which of the following is a distributed network of servers that can efficiently deliver web content to users? Option A. Azure Virtual Network. Option B. Azure Logic Apps. Option C. Azure Application Gateway. Option D. Azure Content Delivery Network. And the correct answer is Option D. Azure Content Delivery Network. Explanation. According to the official docs, a Content Delivery Network (CDN) is a distributed network of servers that can efficiently deliver web content to users. CDNs store cached content on edge servers in point-of-presence (POP) locations that are close to end users to minimize latency. Azure Content Delivery Network offers developers a global solution for rapidly delivering high-bandwidth content to users by caching their content at strategically placed physical nodes across the world. Azure CDN can also accelerate dynamic content, which cannot be cached by leveraging various network optimizations using CDN POPs. For example, route optimization to bypass Border Gateway Protocol (BGP). Next question. For industries that work with highly sensitive data such as banking, finance, government, and healthcare, cloud may be their best cloud option. Option A. Private. Option B. Public. Option C. Hybrid. And the correct answer is Option C. Hybrid. Explanation. For industries that work with highly sensitive data such as banking, finance, government, and healthcare, hybrid may be their best cloud option. For example, some regulated industries require certain types of data to be stored on-premises while allowing less sensitive data to be stored on the cloud. In this kind of hybrid cloud architecture, organizations gain the flexibility of the public cloud for less regulated computing tasks while still meeting the industry requirements. Next question. When you as a consumer are implementing a software as a service SaaS solution, you are responsible for configuring high availability. Option A. No change is needed. Option B. configuring the SaaS solution. Option C, installing the SaaS solution. Option D, creating a resource group. And the correct answer is option B, configuring the SaaS solution. Explanation. Software as a service SaaS allows users to connect to and use cloud-based apps over the internet. Common examples are email, calendaring, and office tools such as Microsoft Office 365. SaaS provides a complete software solution that you purchase on a pay-as-you-go basis from a cloud service provider. You rent the use of an app for your organization and your users connect to it over the internet, usually with a web browser. All of the underlying infrastructure, middleware, app software, and app data are located in the service provider's data center. The service provider manages the hardware and software, and with the appropriate service agreement, will ensure the availability and the security of the app and your data as well. SaaS allows your organization to get quickly up and running with an app at minimal upfront cost. If you have used a web-based email service such as Outlook, Hotmail, or Yahoo Mail, then you have already used a form of SaaS. With these services, you log into your account over the internet, often from a web browser. The email software is located on the service provider's network, and your messages are stored there as well. You can access your email and stored messages from a web browser on any computer or internet-connected device. The previous examples are free services for personal use. For organizational use, you can rent productivity apps such as email, collaboration, and calendaring, and sophisticated business applications such as customer relationship management (CRM), enterprise resource planning (ERP), and document management. You pay for the use of these apps by subscription of according to the level of use. Next question. Which of the following services can help you? Assign time-bound access to resources using start and end dates. Enforce multi-factor authentication to activate any role. Option A, Azure DDoS protection. Option B, Azure Advanced Threat Protection, ATP. Option C, Azure Privileged Identity Management. Option D, Azure Security Center. And the correct answer is option C, Azure Privileged Identity Management. Explanation. Important question. Azure Active Directory Azure AD Privileged Identity Management PIM is a service that enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to important resources in your organization. These resources include resources in Azure AD, Azure, and other Microsoft online services like Office 365 or Microsoft Intune. Reasons to use. Organizations want to minimize the number of people who have access to secure information or resources, because that reduces the chance of a malicious actor getting that access or an authorized user inadvertently impacting a sensitive resource. However, users still need to carry out privileged operations in Azure AD, Azure, Office 365, or SaaS apps. Organizations can give users just-in-time privileged access to Azure resources and Azure AD. There is a need for oversight for what those users are doing with their administrator privileges. Next question. You can significantly reduce cost up to 72% as compared to pay-as-you-go pricing by dash. Option A, provisioning a lot of resources. Option B, using reserved instances. Option C, using the free tier. Option D, not using a lot of resources. And the correct answer is option B, using reserved instances. Explanation. You can significantly reduce cost up to 72% compared to pay-as-you-go prices with 1 year or 3 year terms on Windows and Linux virtual machines VMS. When you combine the cost savings gained from Azure RI's reserved instances with the added value of the Azure hybrid benefit, you can save up to 80%. It is possible to lower your total cost of ownership by combining Azure reserved instances with pay-as-you-go prices to manage cost across predictable and variable workloads.
In many cases, you can further reduce your cost with reserved instance size flexibility. Next question. A resource can belong to more than one resource group. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. No, one resource is equal to one resource group. Very simply logic. Next question. Dash offers fully managed file shares in the cloud that are accessible via the industry standard server message block SMB protocol or network file system NFS protocol. This means it can be used to completely replace or supplement traditional on-premises file servers or NAS devices. Option A, Azure Data Lake Storage. Option B, Azure SQL Database. Option C, Azure Files. Option D, Azure Blob Storage. And the correct answer is option C, Azure Files. Explanation. From the official docs, Azure Files is Microsoft's easy-to-use cloud file system. Azure file shares can be seamlessly used in Windows and Windows Server. To use an Azure file share with Windows, you must either mount it, which means assigning it a drive letter, or mount point path, or access it via its UNC path. Unlike other SMB shares you may have interacted with, such as those hosted on a Windows server, Linux Samba server, or NAS device, Azure file shares do not currently support Kerberos authentication with your Active Directory AD or Azure Active Directory AAD identity. Instead, you must access your Azure file share with the storage account key for the storage account containing your Azure file share. A storage account key is an administrator key for a storage account, including administrator permissions to all files and folders within the file share you are accessing, and for all file shares and other storage resources, blobs, queues, tables, etc. contained within your storage account. Question 31. Azure Virtual Machines VM are classified as which of the following offerings? Option A, Software as a Service SaaS. Option B, Platform as a Service PaaS. Option C, Database as a Service DAAS. Option D, Infrastructure as a Service IaaS. And the correct answer is option D, Infrastructure as a Service IaaS. Explanation. According to the official Azure website, Azure VMS are classified as IaaS since you are renting out physical hardware. Refer to this image. Next question. Which of the following can be used to manage your Azure resources from an iPhone? Option A, Azure Mobile App. Option B, Azure CLI. Option C, Windows PowerShell. Option D, Azure Portal. Option E, Azure Cloud Shell. And the correct answer is option A, Azure Mobile App. And option D, Azure Portal. And option E, Azure Cloud Shell. Explanation. The Azure Portal is the web-based portal for managing Azure. Being web-based, you can use the Azure Portal on an iPhone. Azure Cloud Shell is a web-based command line for managing Azure. You access the Azure Cloud Shell from the Azure Portal. Being web-based, you can use the Azure Cloud Shell on an iPhone. Incorrect answers. Option A, Azure CLI can be installed on Mac OS but it cannot be installed on an iPhone. Option D, Windows PowerShell can be installed on Mac OS but it cannot be installed on an iPhone. Next question. Which of the following Azure storage solutions meets all the following requirements? Number 1. The ability to handle unstructured data, document, graph, key value. Number 2. Automatically index all data regardless of the data model. Number 3. Multi-region writes and data distribution to any Azure region. Option A, Azure Files. Option B, Azure SQL Databases. Option C,
Azure Database for MariaDB. Option D, Azure Cosmos DB. Option E, Azure SQL Edge. Option F, Azure Cache for Redis. And the correct answer is option D, Azure Cosmos DB. Explanation. From the official documentation, today's applications are required to be highly responsive and always online. To achieve low latency and high availability, instances of these applications need to be deployed in data centers that are close to their users. Applications need to respond in real time to large changes in users at peak hours, store ever-increasing volumes of data, and make this data available to users in milliseconds. Azure Cosmos DB is Microsoft's globally distributed, multi-model database service. With a click of a button, Cosmos DB enables you to elastically and independently scale throughput and storage across any number of Azure regions worldwide. You can elastically scale throughput and storage and take advantage of fast, single-digit millisecond data access using your favorite API, including SQL, MongoDB, Cassandra, Tables, or Gremlin. Cosmos DB provides comprehensive service level agreements (SLAs) for throughput, latency, availability, and consistency guarantees, something no other database service offers. Azure Cosmos DB is a great way to store unstructured and JSON data. Combined with Azure Functions, Cosmos DB makes storing data quick and easy, with much less code than required for storing data in a relational database. Next question. Permissions are by default inherited by all resources residing in a resource group. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option B, yes. Explanation. From the official docs, a resource group can be used to scope access control for administrative actions. By default, permissions set at the resource level are inherited by the resources in the resource group. Next question. Inter-region transfer of data is always free of cost. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. It is important to note that data inbound ingress is free, but data outbound egress is not free. Look at the following details from the official documentation. Next question. A hacker group recently attacked your video streaming website and all your resources were exhausted and unavailable to your users. What can you do to prevent this type of attack in the future? Option A. Use a network security group. Option B. Use Azure DDoS protection. Option C. Use an Azure firewall. Option D. Use Azure virtual networks. And the correct answer is option B. Use Azure DDoS protection. Explanation. Azure has two DDoS service offerings that provide protection from network attacks, Layer 3 and Layer 4. DDoS Protection Basics and DDoS Protection Standard. DDoS Protection Basic. Basic protection is integrated into Azure by default at no additional cost. The scale and capacity of the globally deployed Azure network provides defense against common network layer attacks through always-on traffic monitoring and real-time mitigation. DDoS Protection Basic requires no user configuration or application changes. DDoS Protection Basic helps protect all Azure services, including PaaS services like Azure DNS. Basic DDoS protection in Azure consists of both software and hardware components. A software control plane decides when, where, and what type of traffic should be steered through hardware appliances that analyze and remove attack traffic. The control plane makes the decision based on an infrastructure-wide DDoS protection policy. This policy is statically set and universally applied to all Azure customers. For example, the DDoS protection policy specifies at what traffic volume the protection should be triggered. That is, the tenant's traffic should be routed through scrubbing appliances. The policy then specifies how the scrubbing appliances should mitigate the attack.
The Azure DDoS Protection Basic service is targeted at protection of the infrastructure and protection of the Azure platform. It mitigates traffic when it exceeds a rate that is so significant that it might affect multiple customers in a multi-tenant environment. It doesn't provide altering or per customer customized policy. DDoS protection standard protection provides enhanced DDoS mitigation features. It's automatically tuned to help protect your specific Azure resources in a virtual network. Protection is simple to enable on any new or existing virtual network, and it requires no application or resources changes. It has several advantages over the basic service, including logging, alerting, and telemetry. The following sections outline the key features of the Azure DDoS Protection Standard service. Next question. You are the senior architect of XYZ organization, and the senior management has requested to migrate all on-prem resources to the cloud. The requirement is that only platform as a service solutions must be used in Azure. Would this meet the goal? Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option B, yes. Explanation. Please always remember, Azure App Service and Azure SQL databases are both PaaS services. Azure App Service allows us to quickly build, deploy, and scale web apps created with popular frameworks such as Core, Node.js, Java, PHP, Ruby, or Python in containers or running on any operating system. It offers rigorous, enterprise-grade performance, security, and compliance requirements by using the fully managed platform for your operational and monitoring tasks. Azure SQL Database. Microsoft Azure SQL Database is a managed cloud database provided as a part of Microsoft Azure. A cloud database is a database that runs on a cloud computing platform, and access to it is provided as a service. Managed database services take care of scalability, backup, and high availability of the database. Next question. Resources don't inherit the tax you apply to a resource group or a subscription. Option A, true. Option B, false. And the correct answer is option A, true. Explanation. From the official docs, yes, this is true. Resources don't inherit the tax you apply to a resource group or a subscription. To apply tax from a subscription or resource group to the resources, see Azure Policies tags. Next question. Which of the following displays personalized recommendations for all your subscriptions? And you can use filters to select recommendations for specific subscriptions, resource groups, or services. Option A, Azure Arc. Option B, Azure Service Health. Option C, Azure Monitor. Option D, Azure Advisor. And the correct answer is option D, Azure Advisor. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Advisor evaluates your Azure resources and makes recommendations to help improve reliability, security, and performance, achieve operational excellence, and reduce cost. Advisor is designed to help you save time on cloud optimization. The recommendation service includes suggested actions you can take right away, postpone, or dismiss. The recommendations are available via the Azure portal and the API, and you can set up notifications to alert you to new recommendations. When you are in the Azure portal, the Advisor dashboard displays personalized recommendations for all your subscriptions, and you can use filters to select recommendations for specific subscriptions, resource groups, or services. Next question. You plan to create a Netflix-like streaming service and would like to serve video content to users worldwide. Which of the following would help you deliver the best possible service with least latency? Option A, an Azure Virtual Network NAT. Option B, a Content Delivery Network CDN. Option C, an Azure Express Route Circuit. Option D, an Azure Load Balancer. And the correct answer is option B, a Content Delivery Network CDN. Explanation. The question states that users are located worldwide
and need the least possible latency. The video playback experience would be improved if they can download the video from servers in the same region as the users. We can achieve this by using a content delivery network. A content delivery network (CDN) is a distributed network of servers that can efficiently deliver web content to users. CDNs store cached content on edge servers in point of presence (POP) locations that are close to end users to minimize latency. Azure Content Delivery Network (CDN) offers developers a global solution for rapidly delivering high bandwidth content to users by caching their content at strategically placed physical nodes across the world. Azure CDN can also accelerate dynamic content, which cannot be cached by leveraging various network optimization using CDN POPs. For example, route optimization to bypass Border Gateway Protocol (BGP). The benefits of using Azure CDN to deliver website assets include: Number 1. Better performance and improved user experience for end users, especially when using applications in which multiple round trips are required to load content. Number 2. Large scaling to better handle instantaneous high loads, such as the start of a product launch event. Number 3. Distribution of user requests and serving of content directly from edge servers so that less traffic is sent to the origin server. Next question. One of the teams in your company is looking for a solution for collecting, analyzing, and potentially taking action based on the metric and logging data from your entire Azure and on-premises environment. Which of the following would you recommend? Option A, Azure Insights. Option B, Azure Logs. Option C, Azure Monitor. Option D, Azure Advisor. And the correct answer is option C, Azure Monitor. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Monitor is a platform for collecting, analyzing, visualizing, and potentially taking action based on the metric and logging data from your entire Azure and on-premises environment. The following diagram illustrates just how comprehensive Azure Monitor is. On the left is a list of the sources of logging and metric data that can be collected at every layer in your application architecture, from application to operating system and network. Next, in the center, you can see how the logging and metric data is stored in central repositories. Next, on the right, the data is used in a number of ways. You can view real-time and historical performance across each layer of your architecture, or aggregated and detailed information. The data is displayed at different levels for different audiences. You can view high-level reports on the Azure Monitor dashboard or create custom views by using Power BI and Custo queries. Additionally, you can use the data to help you react to critical events in real time through alerts delivered to teams via SMS, email, and so on. Or you can use thresholds to trigger auto-scaling functionality to scale up or down to meet the demand. Next question. Which of the following services allows you to send events generated from Azure resources to applications? Option A, Azure Cognitive Services. Option B, Azure Event Grid. Option C, Azure Event Hub. Option D, Azure App Service. And the correct answer is option B, Azure Event Grid. Explanation. A summary from the official Azure documentation. Next question. Data in an Azure storage account is replicated 3 times in the primary region. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option A, yes. Explanation. Azure storage always stores multiple copies of your data so that it is protected from planned and unplanned events, including transient hardware failures, network or power outages, and massive natural disasters. Redundancy ensures that your storage account meets the Service Level Agreement (SLA) for Azure storage even in the face of failures. Next question. Which of the following statements is accurate? If you want to migrate a website that is hosted on-prem at the moment to Azure, One of the clear benefits is the pay-as-you-go pricing that comes with Azure. Option A. This is not true. We first need to pay to transfer all the website data to Azure. Option B. This is not true. You need a VPN to complete the migration, which will cost a lot. Option C. The given statement is correct. Option D. This is not true. A website hosted on Azure will be costlier as it's charged by the second. And the correct answer is option C. The given statement is correct. Explanation. When planning to migrate a website to Azure, the pay-as-you-go pricing model is a big advantage. You can even use Azure websites to accomplish this. Azure websites is offered in 4 tiers: free, shared preview, basic, and standard. Website shared preview. The price for the shared tier during preview is $0.013 per hour per website instance. This price reflects a 33% preview discount. Websites basic and standard. The basic and standard tiers offer multiple instance sizes as well as scaling to meet changing capacity needs, starting from $56 for a basic single small instance and $75 for a standard single small instance. For more details on features per price tier, click here. Incorrect answers. You do not need a VPN for Azure websites. You do not pay to transfer data into Azure websites. You are not charged by the second. Next question. If you assign permissions to a resource group, all the resources inside it inherit these permissions. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option B, yes. Explanation. Yes, it is true that if you assign certain permissions to a resource group, then all the resources inside it inherit those permissions. See below. Very important to understand and remember these diagrams. A resource group is a container that holds related resources for an Azure solution. The resource group can include all the resources for the solution, or only those resources that you want to manage as a group. You decide how you want to allocate resources to resource groups based on what makes the most sense for your organization. Generally, we add resources that share the same life cycle to the same resource group, so you can easily deploy, update, and delete them as a group. Question 47. Which of the following can you use to implement strict governance and ensure that the right people have access to the right resources, and only when they need it? Option A, Azure Bastion. Option B, Azure Active Directory. Option C, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Option D, Microsoft Sentinel. And the correct answer is option B, Azure Active Directory. Explanation. From the official docs, Azure Active Directory, part of Microsoft Intra, is an enterprise identity service that provides single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and conditional access to guard against 99.9% of cybersecurity attacks. Microsoft Defender for Cloud is a solution for cloud security posture management and cloud workload protection that finds weak spots across cloud configurations, helps strengthen the overall security posture of environments, and can protect workloads across multi-cloud and hybrid environments from evolving threats. Azure Bastion is a fully managed service that provides more secure and seamless remote desktop protocol RDP and secure shell protocol SSH access to virtual machines VMS without any exposure through public IP addresses. Microsoft Sentinel is a bird's eye view across the enterprise. It puts the cloud and large-scale intelligence from decades of Microsoft security experience to work. Make your threat detection and response smarter and faster with artificial intelligence. Next question. Dash is an agreement with Microsoft to use one or more Microsoft cloud platforms or services, for which charges accrue based on either a per-user license fee or on cloud-based resource consumption. Option A, a user account. Option B, a license. Option C, a subscription. Option D, a resource group. And the correct answer is option C, a subscription. Explanation. According to the official docs, as you can see on the screen. Next question. One of the definitions of the hybrid cloud model is to use multiple public clouds in conjunction with a private cloud. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option B, yes. Explanation. From the official docs, a hybrid cloud, sometimes called a cloud hybrid, is a computing environment that combines an on-premises data center, also called a private cloud, with a public cloud, allowing data and applications to be shared between them. Some people define hybrid cloud to include multi-cloud configurations wherein organization uses more than one public cloud in addition to their on-premises data center. Next question. Which of the following is a serverless solution that allows you to write less code, maintain less infrastructure, and save on cost? Option A, Azure DevOps. Option B, Azure Functions. Option C, Azure Logic Apps. Option D, Azure App Service. And the correct answer is option B, Azure Functions. Explanation. Azure Functions allows you to run small pieces of code called functions without worrying about application infrastructure. With Azure Functions, the cloud infrastructure provides all the up-to-date servers you need to keep your application running at scale. A function is triggered by a specific type of event. Supported triggers include responding to changes in data, responding to messages, running on a schedule, or as a result of an HTTP request. Few of the features of Azure Functions are on the screen. Next question. Which of the following services would you help achieve the following? Number 1. Create and manage a group of load-balanced VMS. Number 2. Provide high availability and application resiliency by distributing VMS across availability zones. Number 3. Allows your application to automatically scale as resource demand changes. Option A. Azure Reason Pairs. Option B. Azure Scale Sets. Option C. Azure Subscriptions. Option D. Azure Resource Groups. And the correct answer is option B. Azure Scale Sets. Explanation. A great article from the official Microsoft documentation. Next question. An organization would like to create a web app to allow its employees to enter their vacation, time off details and then store that information in a backend storage solution. They have noted that Python is their preferred language. As the lead consultant, which service would you recommend? Option A. Azure App Service. Option B. Azure Functions. Option C. Azure Cosmos DB. Option D. Azure Kubernetes. And the correct answer is option A. Azure App Service. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, Azure App Service is an HTTP-based service for hosting web applications, REST APIs, and mobile backends. You can develop in your favorite language, be it Net, Core, Java, Ruby, Node.js, PHP, or Python. Applications run and scale with ease on both Windows and Linux-based environments. Next question. You have managed an app that you developed and deployed on-prem for a long time, but would now like to move it to Azure and be relieved of all the manual administration and maintenance. Which of the following buckets would be most suitable for your use case? Option A. Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS. Option B. Database as a Service, DAAS. Option C. Software as a Service, SaaS. Option D. Platform as a Service, PaaS. And the correct answer is option D. Platform as a Service, PaaS. Explanation. Platform as a Service is a complete development and deployment environment in the cloud, with resources that enable you to deliver everything from simple cloud-based apps to sophisticated, cloud-enabled enterprise applications. You purchase the resources you need from a cloud service provider on a pay-as-you-go basis and access them over a secure internet connection. Like IaaS, PaaS includes infrastructure, servers, storage and networking, but also middleware development tools, business intelligence services, database management systems, and more. PaaS is designed to support the complete web application lifecycle: building, testing, deploying, managing, and updating. PaaS allows you to avoid the expense and complexity of buying and managing software licenses, the underlying application infrastructure and middleware, container orchestrators such as Kubernetes, or the development tools and other resources. You manage the applications and services you develop, and the cloud service provider typically manages everything else.
Next question. Your company plans to deploy multiple virtual machines in Azure. As the lead architect, you must ensure that all these virtual machines are available if a single data center fails. Solution. You deploy the virtual machines to 2 or more availability zones. Would this solution meet the goal? Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option A, yes. Explanation. Absolutely. The answer is in the question itself. If one data center goes down, we can make sure our VM is still running in another data center. This is the entire concept of fault tolerance. Make sure you have enough backups to prevent downtime. Availability zones. An availability zone is a high availability offering that protects your applications and data from data center failures. Availability zones are unique physical locations within an Azure region. Each zone is made up of one or more data centers equipped with independent power, cooling, and networking. Very important, please note. To ensure resiliency, there's a minimum of 3 separate zones in all enabled regions. The physical separation of availability zones within a region protects applications and data from data center failures. Zone redundant services replicate your applications, and data across availability zones protect from single points of failure. With availability zones, Azure offers industry-based 99.99% VM uptime SLA. Azure services that support availability zones fall into 2 categories. Number 1. Zonal services, where a resource is pinned to a specific zone, for example, virtual machines, managed disk, standard IP addresses, or number 2, zone redundant services, when the Azure platform replicates automatically across zones, for example, zone redundant storage SQL database. To achieve comprehensive business continuity on Azure, build your application architecture using the combination of availability zones with Azure region pairs. You can synchronously replicate your applications and data using availability zones within an Azure region for high availability and asynchronously replicate across Azure regions for disaster recovery protection. Next question. When computing and processing demand increases beyond an on-premises data center's capabilities, businesses can easily use the cloud to instantly scale capacity up or down to handle excess capacity. Option A, public. Option B, private. And the correct answer is option A, public. Explanation. From the official docs, when computing and processing demand increases beyond an on-premises data center's capabilities, businesses can use the cloud to instantly scale capacity up or down to handle excess capacity. It also allows them to avoid the time and cost of purchasing, installing, and maintaining new servers that they may not always need. Next question. Which of the following services can automatically sign users in when they are on their corporate devices and connected to your corporate network? Option A, password auth. Option B, single sign-on SSO. Option C, multi-factor authentication MFA. Option D, Azure Sentinel. And the correct answer is option B, single sign-on. Explanation. From the official documentation, Azure Active Directory Seamless Single Sign-On automatically signs users in when they are on their corporate devices, connected to your corporate network. When enabled, users don't need to type in their password to sign in to Azure AD, and usually even type in their usernames. This feature provides your users easy access to your cloud-based applications without needing any additional on-premises components.
With single sign-on, users sign in once with one account to access domain joint devices, company resources, software as a service SaaS applications, and web applications. After signing in, the user can launch applications from the Office 365 portal or the Azure AD My Apps Access panel. Administrators can centralize user account management and automatically add or remove user access to applications based on group membership. Next question. A client of yours is a content creator and would like to be notified via email whenever their course is purchased. Which of the following solutions would be best suited for this automation? Option A, an API app. Option B, a server image in Azure Marketplace. Option C, a web app. Option D, a logic app. And the correct answer is option D, a logic app. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, Azure Logic Apps is a cloud service that helps you schedule, automate, and orchestrate tasks, business processes, and workflows. Then you need to integrate apps, data, systems, and services across enterprises or organizations. Logic App simplifies how you design and build scalable solutions for app integration, data integration, system integration, enterprise application integration (EAI), and business-to-business B2B communication, whether in the cloud or on-premises or both. For example, here are just a few workloads you can automate with Logic Apps. Process and route orders across on-premises systems and cloud services. Send email notifications with Office 365 when events happen in various systems, apps, and services. Move uploaded files from an SFTP or FTP server to Azure storage. Monitor tweets for a specific subject, analyze the sentiment, and create alerts or tasks for items that need review. An example of a flow. Next question. Fill in the blanks. Dash. Is the mission critical cloud delivering breakthrough innovation to US government customers and their partners? Only US federal, state, local, and tribal governments and their partners have access to this dedicated instance, with operations controlled by screened US citizens. Option A, Azure Government. Option B, Azure Nation. Option C, Azure US. Option D, Azure United States. And the correct answer is option A, Azure Government. Explanation. From the official docs, Azure Government, it is the mission-critical cloud delivering breakthrough innovation to US government customers and their partners. Only US federal, state, local, and tribal governments and their partners have access to this dedicated instance, with operations controlled by screened US citizens. Next question. Suppose the lead architect in your company has asked your team to implement a PaaS-based solution in Azure for a quick proof of concept, POC, to senior management. One of your colleagues goes ahead and creates an Azure app service and 3 Azure virtual machines. Would you agree with this implementation? Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option A, no. Explanation. An Azure App Service is a PaaS platform as a service, so this is not an issue. However, Azure Virtual Machines fall under the category of IaaS, Infrastructure as a Service, since you are renting infrastructure. Therefore, we would disagree with this decision. Next question. Your organization has an on-premise infrastructure. The requirement from senior management is to migrate everything to the cloud. What would you as an advisor recommend to deal with an unexpected Azure outage in a data center or availability zone? Option A, elasticity. Option B, scalability. Option C, using cheap resources to lose lesser money. Option D, fault tolerance. And the correct answer is option D, fault tolerance. Explanation. There are several mechanisms built into Microsoft Azure to ensure services and applications remain available in the event of a failure. Such failures can include hardware failures, such as hard disk crashes, or temporary availability issues of dependent services, such as storage or networking services. Azure and its software-controlled infrastructure are written in a way to anticipate and manage such failures. In the event of a failure, the Azure infrastructure, the Fabric controller reacts immediately to restore services and infrastructure. For example, if a virtual machine fails due to a hardware failure on the physical host, the Fabric controller moves that VM to another physical node based on the same hard disk stored in Azure storage. Azure is similarly capable of coordinating upgrades and updates in such a way as to avoid service downtime. For computing resources such as cloud services, traditional IaaS VMS, VM scale sets, the most important and fundamental concepts for enabling high availability are fault domains and upgrade domains. These have been part of Azure since its inception. Question 61. Azure HD Insight, an example of a software as a service SaaS offering. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. No, Azure HD Insight is a PaaS offering. From the official Azure documentation, run popular open source frameworks including Apache Hadoop, Spark, Hive, Kafka, and more. Using Azure HD Insight, a customizable enterprise-grade service for open source analytics. Effortlessly process massive amounts of data and get all the benefits of the broad open source project ecosystem with the global scale of Azure. Easily migrate your big data workloads and processing to the cloud. Next question. Every Azure region is composed of a set of data centers. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option A, yes. Explanation. A region is a set of data centers deployed within a latency-defined perimeter and connected through a dedicated regional low-latency network. Each Azure region has a minimum of 3 availability zones. Next question. Select the 3 types of storage tiers for Azure Blob Storage. Option A, Infrequently Accessed Tier. Option B, Archive Storage Tier. Option C, Deep Sleep Tier. Option D, Hot Tier. Option E, Cold Tier. And the correct answer is option B, Archive Storage Tier. And option D, Hot Tier. Explanation. Azure Storage offers different access tiers, which allow you to store blob object data in the most cost-effective manner. The available access tiers include: Number 1. Hot storage, optimized for storing data that is accessed frequently. Number 2. Cool storage, optimized for storing data that is infrequently accessed and stored for at least 30 days. Number 3. Archive storage, optimized for storing data that is rarely accessed and stored for at least 180 days, with flexible latency requirements on the order of hours. Next question. Which of the following would you need to set up alerts for outages or when autoscaling is about to deploy new instances? Option A, Azure Service Health. Option B, Azure Bastion. Option C, Azure Advisor. Option D, Azure Monitor. And the correct answer is option D, Azure Monitor. Explanation. You can use Azure Monitor to set up alerts for key events that are related to your specific resources. Next question. If you want to raise the limit or quota above the default limit, dash. Option A, upgrade your support plan. Option B, define a blueprint in Azure Blueprint to implement this change. Option C, open an online customer support request at no charge. Option D, create an Azure policy defining this increase, but it will be charged. And the correct answer is option C, open an online customer support request at no charge. Explanation. If you want to raise the limit or quota above the default limit, you can open an online customer support request at no charge. Next question. It's possible to deploy an Azure VM from an Ubuntu system by using PowerShell in the Cloud Shell. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option A. Yes. Explanation. Tip. Most such questions mentioning operating systems, Ubuntu, Linux, Windows, Mac OS, are to create confusion. If you can open a browser, you can access the Cloud Shell, which gives you access to Bash or PowerShell. Azure Cloud Shell is an interactive, authenticated, browser-accessible shell for managing Azure resources. It provides the flexibility of choosing the shell experience that best suits the way you work, either Bash or PowerShell. Next question. Which of the following is not a cost-saving solution? Option A. Use Azure Reserved Virtual Machine instances. Option B. Choosing an appropriate instance type for a VM. Option C. Load balance your virtual machines to manage incoming traffic. Option D. Using a pay-as-you-go subscription. And the correct answer is option C. Load balance your virtual machines to manage incoming traffic. Explanation. Load balancing is used for performance optimization and not cost saving. Load balancing refers to evenly distributing load, incoming network traffic, across a group of backend resources or servers. Azure Load Balancer operates at layer 4 of the Open Systems Interconnection OSI model. It's the single point of contact for clients. Load Balancer distributes inbound flows that arrive at the load balancer's front-end to back-end pool instances. These flows are according to configured load balancing rules and health probes. The back-end pool instances can be Azure virtual machines or instances in a virtual machine scale set. A public load balancer can provide outbound connections for virtual machines inside your virtual network. These connections are accomplished by translating their private IP addresses to public IP addresses. Public load balancers are used to load balanced internet traffic to your VMS. An internal or private load balancer is used where private IPs are needed at the front end only. Internal load balancers are used to load balance traffic inside a virtual network. A load balancer front end can be accessed from an on-premises network in a hybrid scenario. Next question. Availability for all Azure services is calculated over a dash billing cycle. Option A, weekly. Option B, monthly. Option C, quarterly. Option D, yearly. And the correct answer is option B, monthly. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, availability for all Azure services is calculated over a monthly billing cycle. Click here to download SLA for most Microsoft Azure services. Next question. The private preview phase for a service includes formal support. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option A, no. Explanation. No. Private is a phase when Azure invites a few customers to take part in early access to new concepts and features. This phase does not include formal support. It is not available to the general public as well. Next question. A company has approached you to help them plan an architecture that would be capable of capturing data from millions of connected devices and securely storing them for analysis. Which of the following two services would you include in the project proposal? Option A, Azure Notification Hubs. Option B, Azure Data Lake. Option C, Azure Express Route. Option D, Azure IoT Hubs. And the correct answer is option B, Azure Data Lake, and option D, Azure IoT Hubs. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure IoT Hub is a managed service hosted in the cloud that acts as a central message hub for communication between an IoT application and its attached devices. You can connect millions of devices and their backend solutions reliably and securely. Almost any device can be connected to an IoT hub. Several messaging patterns are supported, including device-to-cloud telemetry, uploading files from devices, and request-reply methods to control your devices from the cloud.
IoT Hub also supports monitoring to help you track device creation, device connections, and device failures. IoT Hub scales to millions of simultaneously connected devices and millions of events per second to support your IoT workloads. For more information about scaling your IoT Hub, see IoT Hub Scaling. To learn more about the tiers of service offered by IoT Hub, check out the pricing page. IoT Hub can further route messages to Azure Data Lake storage. Next question. Azure Dash are unique physical buildings located all over the globe that house a group of networked computer servers. Option A. Reasons. Option B. Data centers. Option C. Availability zones. Option D. Geographies. And the correct answer is option B. Data centers. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, Azure data centers are unique physical buildings located all over the globe that house a group of networked computer servers. Next question. Suppose the lead architect in your company has asked your team to implement a PaaS-based solution in Azure for a quick proof of concept POC to senior management. One of your colleagues goes ahead and creates Azure Event Hubs and Azure Blob Storage. Would you agree with this implementation? Option A. Yes. Option B. No. And the correct answer is option B. No. Explanation. Even though Azure Event Hubs falls under PaaS, Azure Blob Storage is considered IaaS and therefore our requirements are not met. Next question. In a private preview, Azure invites all customers to take part in early access to new concepts and features. Option A. False. Option B. True. And the correct answer is option A. False. Explanation. From the official documentation, private preview, during this phase, we invite a few customers to take part in early access to new concepts and features. This phase does not include formal support. Next question. Azure HD Insight can be used to run popular open source frameworks, including Apache Hadoop, Spark, Hive, Kafka, and more for open source big data analytics. Option A. No. Option B. Yes. And the correct answer is option B. Yes. Explanation. Yes, Azure HD Insight is an enterprise-ready, managed cluster service for open source analytics. You can run popular open source frameworks, including Apache Hadoop, Spark, Hive, Kafka, and more. Using Azure HD Insight, a customizable enterprise-grade service for open source analytics, you can also effortlessly process massive amounts of data and get all the benefits of the broad open source project ecosystem with the global scale of Azure. Easily migrate your big data workloads and processing to the cloud. Next question. Which of the following can you use to filter traffic to and from an Azure virtual network? Option A. Azure Advanced Threat Protection ATP. Option B. Azure Firewall. Option C. Azure Network Security Group. Option D. Azure DDoS Protection. And the correct answer is option C. Azure Network Security Group. Explanation. You can use Azure Network Security Group to filter network traffic to and from Azure resources in an Azure virtual network. A network security group contains security rules that allow or deny inbound network traffic to or outbound network traffic from several types of Azure resources. For each rule, you can specify source and destination, port and protocol. This article describes properties of a network security group rule, the default security rules that are applied, and the rule properties that you can modify to create an augmented security rule. Question 77. Is data transfer between Azure services located in two regions free? Option A. No. Option B. Yes. And the correct answer is option A. No. Explanation. Outbound data transfer is charged at the normal rate and inbound data transfer is free. Next question. Which of the following is a great place to start when examining the security of your Azure-based solutions and provides threat protection across all of your services both in Azure and on-premises? Option A, Azure Trust Center. Option B, Azure Advanced Threat Protection. Option C, Azure Security Center. Option D, Azure Compliance Manager. And the correct answer is option C, Azure Security Center. Explanation. A great place to start when examining the security of your Azure-based solutions is Azure Security Center. Security Center is a monitoring service that provides threat protection across all of your services both in Azure and on-premises. Security Center can, number 1, provide security recommendations based on your configurations, resources, and networks. Number 2, monitor security settings across on-premises and cloud workloads and automatically apply required security to new services as they come online. Number 3, continuously monitor all your services and perform automatic security assessments to identify potential vulnerabilities before they can be exploited. Number 4, use machine learning to detect and block malware from being installed on your virtual machines and services. You can also define a list of allowed applications to ensure that only the apps you validate are allowed to execute. Number 5, analyze and identify potential inbound attacks and help to investigate threats and any post-breach activity that might have occurred. Next question. Your compliance team has contacted you and stated that a certain VM running a mission-critical database with confidential data should not be able to connect to other applications and VMS. How would you accomplish this? Option A. No need to do anything as a VM cannot communicate with other services. Option B. Use an Azure load balancer. Option C. Deploy the VM to a brand new resource group. Option D. Deploy the VM to a certain subnet and restrict traffic using a network security group NSG. And the correct answer is option D. Deploy the VM to a certain subnet and restrict traffic using a network security group. Explanation. Azure Virtual Network is the fundamental building block for your private network in Azure. VNet enables many types of Azure resources, such as Azure Virtual Machines, to securely communicate with each other, the Internet and on-premises networks. VNet is similar to a traditional network that you would operate in your own data center, but brings with it additional benefits of Azure's infrastructure, such as scale, availability, and isolation. Subnets. Subnets enable you to segment the virtual network into one or more subnetworks and allocate a portion of the virtual network's address space to each subnet. You can then deploy Azure resources in a specific subnet, just like in a traditional network. Subnets allow you to segment your VNet address space into segments that are appropriate for the organization's internal network. This also improves address allocation efficiency. You can secure resources within subnets using network security groups. For more information, see security groups. You can filter network traffic between subnets using either or both of the following options. Number 1. Security groups. Network security groups and application security groups can contain multiple inbound and outbound security rules that enable you to filter traffic to and from resources by source and destination IP address, port, and protocol. To learn more, see network security groups or application security groups. Number 2. Network virtual appliances. A network virtual appliance is a VM that performs a network function such as a firewall, WAN optimization, or other network function. To view a list of available network virtual appliances that you can deploy in a virtual network, see Azure Marketplace. Next question. Which of the following would you use if you want to keep track of the performance or issues related to your specific VM or container instances, databases, your applications? Option A. Azure Advisor. Option B. Azure Sentinel. Option C. Azure Monitor. Option D. Azure Service Health. And the correct answer is option C, Azure Monitor.
Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, if you want to keep track of the performance or issues related to your specific VM or container instances, databases, your applications, and so on, you want to visit Azure Monitor and create reports and notifications to help you understand how your services are performing or diagnose issues related to your Azure users. Next question. Your manager has asked you to recommend an Azure service that can be used to securely manage and store certificates for your team's services. Which of the following would you recommend? Option A, Azure Confidential Ledger. Option B, Azure Bastion. Option C, Azure Key Vault. Option D, Azure Active Directory. And the correct answer is option C, Azure Key Vault. Explanation. Secure key management is essential to protect data in the cloud. Azure Key Vault encryption keys and small secrets like passwords that use keys stored in hardware security modules. For more assurance, it is possible to import or generate keys in HSMS, and Microsoft processes your keys in FIPS 140-2 Level 2 validated HSMS, hardware and firmware. With Key Vault, Microsoft doesn't see or extract your keys. You can monitor and audit your key use with Azure Logging. Pipe logs into Azure HD Insight or your security information and event management solution for more analysis and threat detection. All of the control, none of the work, the motto. By using Key Vault, you don't need to provision, configure, patch, and maintain HSMS and key management software. Provision new vaults and keys or import keys from your own HSMS in minutes and centrally manage keys, secrets, and policies. You keep control over your keys. Simply grant permission for your own and partner applications to use them as needed. Applications never have direct access to keys. Developers manage keys used for dev or test and seamlessly migrate to production the keys that are managed by security operations. Next question. In the case of resource groups, the most restrictive lock in the inheritance takes precedence. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option A, yes. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, when you apply a lock at a parent scope, all resources within that scope inherit the same lock. Even resources you add later inherit the same parent lock. The most restrictive lock in the inheritance takes precedence. If you have a delete lock on a resource and attempt to delete its resource group, the feature blocks the whole delete operation. Even if the resource group or other resources in the resource group are unlocked, the deletion doesn't happen. You never have a partial deletion. Next question. If you set up a free Azure account, then does the standard support plan come along with this free account? Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option A, no. Explanation. The basic support plan is associated with all accounts, but a standard plan needs to be purchased and cost $100 per month. Next question. As a consultant, which of the following locks would you recommend to an organization to prevent deletion or modification of mission-critical resources? Option A, read only. Option B, cannot change. Option C, cannot modify. Option D is critical. And the correct answer is option A, read only. Explanation. From the official documentation, as an administrator, you can lock an Azure subscription, resource group, or resource to protect them from accidental user deletions and modifications. The lock overrides any user permissions. You can set locks that prevent either deletions or modifications. In the portal, these locks are called delete and read only. In the command line, these locks are called cannot delete and read only. In the left navigation panel, the subscription lock features name is resource logs, while the resource group lock features name is logs. Cannot delete means authorized users can read and modify a resource, but they can't delete it. Read only means authorized users can read a resource, but they can't delete or update it. Applying this lock is similar to restricting all authorized users to the permissions that the reader role provides. Next question. A SaaS solution allows access to the underlying operating system of the application. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. A SaaS solution does not provide access to the operating system. In fact, with a SaaS we have the least maintenance effort, but also the least degree of control. An example of SaaS is Zoom and Outlook, etc. Next question. Azure guarantees 99.99% availability for the free version of the Azure Active Directory. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option A, no. Explanation. From the official documentation. Note from the above image that no SLA is provided for the free tier of the Azure Active Directory. Next question. Which of the following does not affect cost in Azure? Option A, tags. Option B, resource uses. Option C, location. Option D, resource type. Option E, instance size of VMS. And the correct answer is option A, tags. Explanation. Tags do not incur cost, but are rather a great way to know which resources are incurring cost. Next question. You plan to provision infrastructure as a service IaaS resources in Azure. Which of the following is an example of IaaS in Azure? Option A, Azure Virtual Machine. Option B, Azure HD Insight. Option C, Azure Event Hubs. Option D, Azure Machine Learning. And the correct answer is option A, Azure Virtual Machine. Explanation. An Azure Virtual Machine is an example of infrastructure as a service. Azure Machine Learning, Azure Event Hubs, Azure HD Insight are all examples of Platform as a Service PaaS. Next question. A startup is planning to run a few simulations and needs to deploy pre-configured virtual machines in a lab-like environment using ARM templates. These VMS will be used to test app versions and scale up load testing by creating multiple test agents and environments. As the principal consultant, which of the following services would you recommend? Option A, Azure Reserved Virtual Machine Instances. Option B, Azure Dev Test Labs. Option C, Microsoft Managed Desktop. Option D, Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets. And the correct answer is option B, Azure Dev Test Labs. Explanation. From the official documentation, Azure Dev Test Labs is a service for easily creating, using and managing infrastructure as a service, virtual machines and platform as a service environments in labs. Labs offer pre-configured bases and artifacts for creating VMS and Azure Resource Manager templates for creating environments like Azure Web Apps or SharePoint Farms. Lab owners can create pre-configured VMS that have tools and software lab users need. Lab users can claim pre-configured VMS or create and configure their own VMS and environments. Lab policies and other methods track and control lab uses and cost. Next question. Which of the following services can help you decouple components and asynchronous message storage for communication between application components, whether they are running in the cloud, on the desktop, on-premise or on mobile devices? Option A, Azure File Sync. Option B, Azure Data Box. Option C, Azure Asynchronous Communicator. Option D, Azure Queue Storage. And the correct answer is option D, Azure Queue Storage. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, you can use Azure Queue Storage to build flexible applications and separate functions for better durability across large workloads. When you design applications for scale, application components can be decoupled so that they can scale independently. Queue storage gives you asynchronous message queuing for communication between application components, whether they are running in the cloud, on the desktop, on premises, or on mobile devices. A single queue message can be up to 64 KB in size, and a queue can contain millions of messages, up to the total capacity limit of a storage account. Queue storage is often used to create a backlog of work to process asynchronously. Next question. A resource can connect to resources in other resource groups. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option A, yes. Explanation. From the official documentation, a resource can connect to resources in other resource groups. This scenario is common when the two resources are related but don't share the same life cycle. For example, you can have a web app that connects to a database in a different resource group. More about resource groups. Next question. Suppose the lead architect in your company has asked your team to implement a PaaS-based solution in Azure for a quick proof of concept to senior management. One of your colleagues goes ahead and creates an Azure SQL database and an Azure load balancer. Would you agree with this implementation? Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option A, no. Explanation. Tricky question. Platform as a service is a complete development and deployment environment in the cloud. PaaS includes infrastructure as servers, storage, and networking, but also middleware, development tools, business intelligence services, database management systems, and more. Azure SQL databases are PaaS, that's fine, but Azure load balancers are IaaS, not PaaS. Next question. In order to move a VM from one subscription to another, it must first be stopped. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option A, no. Explanation. From the official documentation, virtual machines are resources and can be moved to a new subscription. Moving between subscriptions can be handy if you originally created a VM in a personal subscription and now want to move it to your company's subscription to continue your work. You do not need to stop the VM in order to move it, and it should continue to run during the move. Next question. Is it possible to run a PowerShell module directly from a Windows computer with Azure PowerShell installed? Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option A, yes. Explanation. A PowerShell script can create Azure resources, and since the PowerShell module is installed on the Windows computer, this is easily doable. Next question. Which of the following statements best describes the modern lifecycle policy for Azure products and services? Option A. For products governed by the modern lifecycle policy, Microsoft will provide a minimum of 12 months notification prior to ending support if no successor product or service is offered, excluding free services or preview releases. Option B. For products and services governed by the modern lifecycle policy, unless otherwise noted, Microsoft's policy is to provide a minimum 90 days notification when customers are required to take action in order to avoid significant degradation to the normal use of the products or service. Option C. For products and services governed by the modern lifecycle policy, unless otherwise noted, Microsoft's policy is to provide a minimum 120 days notification when customers are required to take action in order to avoid significant degradation to the normal use of the product or service. Option D. For products governed by the modern lifecycle policy, Microsoft will provide a minimum of 6 months notification prior to ending support if no successor product or service is offered, excluding free services or preview releases. And the correct answer is option A. For products governed by the modern lifecycle policy, Microsoft will provide a minimum of 12 months notification prior to ending support if no successor product or service is offered, excluding free services or preview releases. Explanation. The modern lifecycle policy covers products and services that are serviced and supported continuously. Under this policy, the product or service remains in support if the following criteria are met. Customers must stay current as per the servicing and system requirements published for the product or service. Customers must be licensed to use the product or service. Microsoft must currently offer support for the product or service, hence only the statement. For products governed by the modern lifecycle policy, Microsoft will provide a minimum of 12 months notification prior to ending support if no successor product or service is offered, excluding free services or preview releases, is correct. Next question. Azure Active Directory can restrict access attempts to only those coming from known devices. Option A, false. Option B, true. And the correct answer is option B, true. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure AD provides services such as authentication. This includes verifying identity to access applications and resources. It also includes providing functionality such as self-service password reset, multi-factor authentication, a custom list of banned passwords, and smart lockout services. Single sign-on. SSO enables you to remember only one username and one password to access multiple applications. A single identity is tiered to a user, which simplifies the security model. As users change roles or leave an organization, access modifications are tied to that identity, which greatly reduces the effort needed to change or disable accounts. Application management. You can manage your cloud and on-premises apps by using Azure AD. Features like Application Proxy, SaaS apps, the My Apps portal, also called the Access Panel, and Single Sign-On provide a better user experience. Device management. Along with accounts for individual people, Azure AD supports the registration of devices. Registration enables devices to be managed through tools like Microsoft Intune. It also allows for device-based conditional access policies to restrict access attempts to only those coming from known devices, regardless of the requesting user account. Next question. Each Azure subscription can trust multiple Active Directories. Option A, false. Option B, true. And the correct answer is option A, false. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, an Azure subscription has a trust relationship with Azure Active Directory. A subscription trusts Azure AD to authenticate users, services, and devices. Multiple subscriptions can trust the same Azure AD directory. Each subscription can only trust a single directory. Next question. Australia is composed of one single Azure region. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option A, no. Explanation. No, Australia has several Azure regions, including Australia East, Central, Southeast, etc. Next question. An Azure subscription can trust multiple Azure Active Directory tenants. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option A, no. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, an Azure subscription has a trust relationship with Azure Active Directory. A subscription trusts Azure AD to authenticate users, services, and devices. Please note, multiple subscriptions can trust the same Azure AD directory. Each subscription can only trust a single directory. Next question. You have managed an app that you developed and deployed on-prem for a long time, but would now like to move it to Azure and be relieved of all the manual administration and maintenance. Which of the following buckets would be most suitable for your use case? Option A, Software as a Service. Option B, Database as a Service. Option C, Platform as a Service. Option D, Infrastructure as a Service. And the correct answer is option C, Platform as a Service. Explanation. Platform as a Service is a complete development and deployment environment in the cloud with resources that enable you to deliver everything from simple cloud-based apps to sophisticated cloud-enabled enterprise applications. You purchase the resources you need from a cloud service provider on a pay-as-you-go basis and access them over a secure internet connection. Like IaaS, PaaS includes infrastructure, servers, storage, and networking,
but also middleware, development tools, business intelligence services, database management systems, and more. PaaS is designed to support the complete web application lifecycle, building, testing, deploying, managing, and updating. PaaS allows you to avoid the expense and complexity of buying and managing software licenses, the underlying application infrastructure and middleware, container orchestrators such as Kubernetes, or the development tools and other resources. You manage the applications and services you develop, and the cloud service provider typically manages everything else. Since we need to reduce the overhead effort of managing everything and create our own solution, PaaS is the best option.
Next question. Which of the following services is an Apache Spark-based analytics platform optimized for the Microsoft Azure Cloud Services platform? Option A, Azure Cognitive Services. Option B, Azure Bot Services. Option C, Azure Machine Learning Studio. Option D, Azure Databricks. And the correct answer is option D, Azure Databricks. Explanation. Please read this answer carefully. Optimized is the keyword in the question. A lot of people get confused between Azure Databricks and Azure HD Insight. Azure HD Insight is primarily a managed Apache Hadoop service that lets you run Apache Spark, Apache Hive, Apache Kafka, Apache HBase, and more in the cloud. Azure Databricks is a premium Spark offering that is ideal for customers who want their data scientists to collaborate easily and run their Spark-based workloads efficiently and at industry-leading performance. It is essentially an Apache Spark-based analytics platform optimized for the Microsoft Azure Cloud Services platform. Next question. Is there a default spending limit for the Azure free account? Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option B, yes. Explanation. A credit of $200 is assigned to the free account and is valid for 30 days from the date of activation. Next question. A startup has deployed a set of virtual machines which are critical for their day-to-day operations. They need to ensure their availability, even if a single data center goes down. One of their interns has suggested that deploying these VMS to multiple resource groups will solve the problem. Do you agree? Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. A resource group is a logical container for Azure resources. When you create a resource group, you specify which location to create the resource group in. However, when you create a virtual machine and place it in the resource group, the virtual machine can still be in a different location, different data center. Therefore, creating multiple resource groups, even if they are in separate data centers, does not ensure that the services running on the virtual machines are available if a single data center fails. What you really need is high availability and deploying the VM to multiple regions and AZs. Next question. Where you can obtain up-to-date details about the personal data Microsoft processes, how it processes it, and for what purposes. Option A, Azure Trust Center. Option B, Compliance Manager. Option C, Microsoft Privacy Statement. Option D, Azure Knowledge Center. And the correct answer is option C, Microsoft Privacy Statement. Explanation. This privacy statement explains the personal data Microsoft processes, how Microsoft processes it, and for what purposes. Microsoft offers a wide range of products, including server products used to help operate enterprises worldwide, devices you use in your home, software that students use at school, and services developers use to create and host what's next. References to Microsoft products in this statement include Microsoft services, websites, apps, software, servers, and devices. Please read the product-specific details in this privacy statement, which provide additional relevant information. This statement applies to the interactions Microsoft has with you and the Microsoft products listed below, as well as other Microsoft products that display this statement. Next question. An organization is planning to migrate large amounts of data from their on-prem storage to Azure. However, they are worried of incurring huge costs for this transfer and have halted their plans for now. Is this assumption valid? Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. Data ingress incoming to Azure data center is free. So, the organization's assumptions are invalid. Next question. Fill in the blanks. Dash enables a user to log in one time and use that credential to access multiple resources and applications from different providers. Option A, passwordless. Option B, multi-factor authentication. Option C, domain name service. Option D, single sign-on. And the correct answer is option D, single sign-on. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, SSO enables you to remember only one username and one password to access multiple applications. A single identity is tied to a user, which simplifies the security model. As users change roles or leave an organization, access modifications are tied to that identity, which greatly reduces the effort needed to change or disable accounts. Thank you for watching this video. Buy our AZ 900 premium questions with 50% off. Check link in the description.